And this being along expected lines, the Quota Bill, after having passed both houses of Parliament, has now been challenged in the Supreme Court. The group, which is called Youth for Equality, has moved Supreme Court after the Quota Bill was passed. In both houses, the Youth for Equality challenges this economic reservation 10% quota, and the petitioner maintains here in this challenge that economic criteria cannot be the ground for reservation. We have with us our Deputy News Editor Meenakshi Bhanja getting us further inputs now. Meenakshi, we were of course expecting this to finally play out in the courts as a final chapter with respect to this bill now. The politicians refuse to intervene here, wanting to stand politically correct, and now it's for the courts to look into this.
Well, indeed, sir, this is the first challenge which has been mounted in the Supreme Court. As we speak, we at Mirror Now have procured a copy of the said petition which is challenging this 124th Constitution Amendment Bill. And it is an NGO called Youth for Equality which has moved the Supreme Court, and it is citing the past judgment of the Supreme Court in the Indra Soni case, which categorically had ruled that economic criteria alone cannot be the ground for reservation. So essentially, Sahel, we will see furthermore challenges perhaps also being mounted in the Supreme Court. But like you correctly referred to, it was only yesterday. Remember, this bill has been brought about in both houses of Parliament in 3 days' time, Sahel. And clearly, there have been a lot of back and forth on the floor of the House, from BMP to Congress to top politicians who have argued as to how there has not been due deliberations or even the legislative processes of passing of the bill has not been complied with in entirety. But then again, for the sake of political capital, because no party wants to be caught on the back foot on this one, opposing the bill ahead of 2019. That's the reality of the times we have been living in. And like you correctly referred to, therefore, the onus now falls again on the Supreme Court of India to judge whether or not indeed there has been a tinkering around with the basic framework of the Constitution. And this petition is alleging that via this bill, the government and the parties have attempted to tinker around with the broad framework of the Constitution on the premise that economic criteria cannot solely be a ground for according reservation. So yes, we are expecting a lot of heated debate, discussions and discourses now play out in the Supreme Court legally on this one.
Right. Meenakshi, with respect to the criticism that was raised by opposition parties in both houses of Parliament that we just saw yesterday and day before, is the challenge put forth in this petition by the Youth for Equality, are the challenges along the same lines to the criticism that we've already heard in Parliament?
Well, that's an interesting question. Yes, Sahar, some of the points are definitely in the era of the debates and discussions that we have seen in the Parliament pertaining to how this is something which is not tenable or unsustainable in law, because it is something which has been ruled upon by the Supreme Court in the past in the Soni case. So, of course, this needs greater evaluation, greater debate in the Supreme Court, which will play out. And we are also breaking on Mirror Now that we cannot rule out the possibility of more petitioners wanting to assail this Constitution amendment before the top court. We are breaking news as it is happening.
Right.
We have procured a copy of the petition here at Mirror Now, and we are breaking the first challenge that has been mounted in the Supreme Court, and it pretty much encompasses a lot of the top law points that have been argued on the floor of the House. We saw some very, very interesting points being highlighted yesterday by Derek O'Brien, and then later in the evening by Kapil Sibal of the Congress Party. And we have also heard from the Government of India, Arun Jaitley, who has said that this is a law which is legally viable. So now comes the final litmus test for the Government of India to prove their case in a court of law. Back to you.
That's right. And not even a day wasted. Soon after, just a day after this was passed by both houses of Parliament, we are being seen this challenged now in the Supreme Court today. Meenakshi, thank you for getting us those inputs.